Students, welcome to the course of Organizational Theory and Behavior. I'm your course instructor Shehzad Handurani, lecturer at the Institute of Business Studies, Kasthango campus. Today, our topic is leadership and contemporary issues in leadership. Our outline it includes conceptualizing leadership. So first of all, we will try to define leadership and understand the basic concept of the leadership. Then we will talk about the evolution of leadership, how leadership evolved in different eras. We will talk about it. Then we will try to differentiate between leadership and power. Then we will talk about leadership and coercion. And at the end, we will try to understand and differentiate between leadership and management. So let's start from the basic concept of the leadership, conceptualizing of leadership. How we can define leadership? So leadership, by definition, leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. So leadership is a process. Leadership is a process of what? It's a process of change. It's a process of motivation. So who you are motivating? You are motivating the individuals. You are motivating the groups. You are motivating the teams. For why you are motivating them? You are motivating them to achieve a common goal, right? So some definitions view leadership as leadership is a focus of group processes, right? So leadership mainly focus on the groups. Leadership mainly influences the teams in the organizations. Leadership can also be defined a personality perspective, right? Leadership, uh, some researchers define leadership as a personality perspective. One of the theory that is about the leadership, that's called the trait theory. Trait theory actually focuses on the characteristics or the traits of the individuals that they possess, and that's called the personality perspective of leadership. For example, the intelligence that a person has, or confidence, determination, integrity, loyalty, right? So such kind of things, the leadership can be defined as a personality perspective. Leadership can also be defined as an act or behavior, right? It's one of the new concept in leadership after the trait theory, that leadership can also be defined as an act or behavior, how a person act towards their subordinates, how a person behave with their subordinates, with their employees. So leadership can also be defined as an act or behavior, right? Another concept about leadership is the power relationship between leader and follower, right? So there is a very strong relationship between leader and follower, right? So it's a two-way process, right? There must be a trust element. There must be loyalty present between the leader and the follower, right? And there must be an element of respect, mutual respect, that must be present between the leader and the follower. So some leadership define leadership as a relationship between power relationship between leader and followers. Leadership can also be defined as a transformational process. So leadership is a transformational process. What does it mean? It means that uh, it's a process that changes and transforms individuals. Leadership is a process that changes and transforms individuals. It involves the exceptional form of influence that move forwards to accomplish more than what is usually expected. So it means that leadership is concerned with emotions, leadership is concerned with values, leadership is concerned with ethics, leadership is concerned with some standards and long term goals. The next, leadership can also be defined as a skill perspective, right? So leadership is also about a skill perspective, which means that the person must possess some form of knowledge and competencies, right? That the people are going to accept him or her as a leader. Then the next one is the evolution of leadership, right? How leadership evolved in different eras. So let's see the evolution of leadership. From 1900 to 1929, there was control and centralization of power, right? People were accepting those as a leader who possess some powers. For example, at that time, there were like the concept of power present there. The people who were, for example, ruling the states, the countries, there were the powerful people. So people were accepting them as their leaders just because the power, the authority that they possess. From 1900 1929, so this was the concept of leadership at that time. Then the concept changed from the power to the trait approach in the 1930s. People who possess some traits, some characteristics, some innate abilities, right? Some competencies, some intelligence. So people were accepting them as their leader. It was the 1930s concept. Then the concept changed from the trait to the group approach, right? So in the group approach, people were calling those as a leaders who are motivating subordinates to accomplish the designated goals, right? They are working in a groups. You are motivating your subordinates to accomplish the designated goals. So the emphasis of the relationship between leader and their followers, their groups was present here, right? It was the 1940s concept, that how people are working in groups to achieve a common goals. Then in the 1950s, the concept was more broad, right? There was a group theory, shared goals, and effectiveness, right? To enhance employees' performance and satisfaction by focusing on employee motivation. This was actually the goal of the group theory, right? And then this concept further explains that there must be shared goals between the leader and the followers, right? For example, the leader will define the goals, the leader will clarify the paths, the leader will try to remove obstacles, right? And the leader will also provide support to their followers, right? So this was like more a broad perspective that came in the 1950s. Then in the 1960s, it viewed leadership as a behavior, right? So leadership was viewed more as a behavior rather than the for example, the power, rather than the traits. How you are acting towards your subordinates, how you are So leadership as a behavior mean how the leader is behaving towards his or her subordinates. In the 1970s, there came the organizational behavior, how the leader is behaving towards his or her subordinates in the organization, right? The people will work for you only if you are treating them well, right? If there is an element of trust, if there is an element of mutual respect, if there is an element of loyalty, right? So it's the concept of the organizational behavior that came in the 1970s. In the 1980s, there came an explosion of research, right? The research is actually expanded in the 1980s, and there came the leader's will, right? Because it's very much important to understand the leader's will, the person who is motivating you. It's very much important, because there was one concept about the leadership that's called pseudo transformational, in which the leader is actually motivating you towards something negative. So it's also important, right, to understand the will of the leader, transformational or pseudo transformational. And then there came the influence, how much that person, the leader, is influencing his or her followers. And then the traits are also important as well, the innate abilities, the capabilities, right, that the person possess, the confidence that the person possess. And then the transformational, actually it's also really much important, how the people is acting or behaving, how much the person possess the values, the ethics, the standard that a person possess. It was also very much important in the 1980s. Then in the 21st century, there was a complexity of research, right? There came the concept of situational leadership, team leadership, transactional leadership, transformational leadership, right? And then of course it's further elements or factors came as well. So there is no one proper definition, or there is no one proper concept that you can say that leadership can be defined as this, right? So there was more like a complexity of research about leadership in the 21st century. Now our next topic is leadership and power. So we will try to differentiate between them. So let's start. Power. How can we define power? It can be defined as the capacity or potential to influence, your ability or your capacity or your potential to influence your followers. Or it can also be defined as ability to affect others' beliefs, their standards and their actions. One is called power, one is called authority. In the authority, there is a concept of volunteerism, right? For example, somebody is going to accept something voluntarily for you, right? People are accepting your orders or your work, they are going to work for you voluntarily. So that's actually called the authority. In the power, there is an element of force. So that's the difference between power and authority, right? So in order to understand power very well, there are some bases of social power presented by French and Raven in 1959, and they are, the first one is called referent power. We have the expert power, we have the legitimate power, we have the reward power, and we have the coercive power. So let's explain. First one, referent power. It can be defined as based on followers' identification and liking for the leader, right? if a person people can do anything for you if that person likes you, if that person adored you. And the example of the referent power can be a teacher who is adored by student has a referent power. So such kind of power is called a referent power. Another one is the expert power, and it can be defined as based on followers perception of the leader's competence, right? The people who possess some expertise, some competence, so that's called the expert power that they have. And the example can be a tour guide who is knowledgeable about a foreign country has expert power, right? So when you are going to a foreign country, or when you are going for a some touristic spots or historical places, so there is a guide present there. That person actually possess certain knowledge about that specific field. So that's called the power that that person has, is actually called the expert power. Then we have the legitimate power. Legitimate power can be associated with having status or formal job authority. The job that you have, so on the basis of that you have some authority, right? The status that you possess, right? For example, doctor, engineer, police. So it's called the power that they have is actually called the legitimate power. And the example can be a judge who administers sentences in the courtroom exhibits legitimate power. The power of the judge is called what? The legitimate power. The next one is reward power, and it can be viewed as derived from having the capacity to provide rewards to others, right? You are rewarding others. If somebody is doing something really good, so you are rewarding them, you are motivating them, you are providing incentive to them. So that's called the reward power. And the example of that could be a supervisor who give rewards to employees who work hard is using the reward power. The next one that we have is the coercive power, and it can be defined as derived from having the capacity to penalize or punish others, right? If somebody is doing something bad, then you are going to punish that person. So that's called the coercive power. And the example is a coach who sits players on the bench for being late to practice is using the coercive power. The person is coming late to the practice, the coach is going to punish that person. So the power that the coach is using the called the coercive power. The next topic that we have is the leadership and coercion. Coercion involves use of force to effect change. Here you are using force. You are using force, right? You are penalizing others. You are using your power that you have. You are using them to force other to work for you. Influencing other to do something by manipulating rewards and penalties in the work environment, right? You are imposing some penalties because you want to take work from others, right? So that's actually called the coercion. And use of threats, punishments, and negative rewards, right? You are using threats, you are using punishments and negative rewards. Power and restraint used to force followers to engage in extreme behavior, right? For example, you are telling someone to do this for me. If that person is not doing that for you, then you are going to for example, let's say the manager is saying, I will fire you if you are not doing that. So you are going against the will of that person. So that's called the coercion. The next one is the leadership and management. So management activities actually it involve management actually produces orders and consistency, right? There is a routine activity, right? For example, you when you are going to your organization, to your company. So let's say you are a manager, so you have certain routine activities that you are following, right? So you have a consistency in your work, right? You have some daily routine works, you have some daily routine files to check, right? So that's actually called the management activities, right? Let's say for example, you are doing some planning, you are doing some budgeting activities. Management is about POLC: planning, organizing, leading and controlling. You are doing that activities. The next one is organizing and staffing, right? You are organizing some things, staffing, for example, recruiting people, hiring people, assigning jobs to the people. Controlling and problem solving, right? This is also one of the basic. Controlling and problem solving, it's also one of the basic function of the management. You are controlling some activities, you are observing some activities and problem solving. If there is any problem that is occurring in the routine activity, so you are trying to solve them. Then the leadership activities, it produces change and movement. So in the leadership there is always change, right? You are doing something new and there is always movement present there. You are not doing the routine task, you are doing something exceptional, you are doing something that is different than the routine activities, right? For example, motivating your employees. They have some daily routine problems other than their work, so the leaders, they have a vision, so they are trying to solve that as well, right? And some of the leadership activities includes establishing directions. You are providing them direction, you are showing them the path, how they can do the work in the easiest and the most effective way. So the leader is actually providing them the path as well. The next one is aligning people. It's also the leader job to align people, to make teams, to make groups, in order to get the goals of the organization. Then motivating or inspiring people. You are motivating your employees, you are they are actually inspired from you. You are not trying to inspire them from you, but they are already inspired from the leader. So it's the leadership activities. So we can say that management and leadership are both crucial for any organization. Both are really much important, but both are played out differently in the organization, right? That's all about our lecture for today. These are the references which I used while making my slides. Thank you.